What is up, guys? It is Lucky Punch Sports, and today we're back with another video going over my college football playoff bracket predictions. And this is the first year with the 12-team bracket, so it's going to be the most fun college football postseason in a long time, and it really is a big toss-up. So I'll be giving you guys my background, explanation on each pick, each team in the playoffs. Here's the first look at the official bracket. The first round is this weekend, the 20th and the 21st. We have the first game there. ASU gets the bye for the Big 12. Oregon gets the Big 10. I was about to say Pac 12. Boise State with the Mountain West and Georgia in the SEC all get the 4 byes. And then, as you can see, there's a 5th conference winner with Clemson in the ACC and then 7 at-large teams. I love the way they're doing it this year. I think next year it could even be a 16. I would cap it at the most there. Some big teams did miss it, like Alabama or Miami. I think Alabama, 9-1 team, 100% deserve to miss it this year. You got to win your game, simple as that. But I think I'd like to see more at-large teams. If you win your conference, you're in my opinion. But the bracket is such a great setup for the year. So let's start at the top with the Clemson Tigers at 12 versus the 5th-ranked Texas Longhorns. And starting with Clemson, the 12-seeded Tigers snuck in as a 10-win team by beating a surprising playoff team in SMU in the ACC championship game. And they kind of had a shaky start to the season. Dabo and Clemson recovered well, but still come in today as 10.5-point underdogs against the Longhorns. Kate Klubnik had a much better year after last year's 9-win season, but they still had the worst year under Dabo since 2010, so not great. They notoriously have avoided the portal this far, but every team seems to be digging into it now, even Clemson currently for the next season. So they find themselves in a tough matchup here against Texas, and I would not give Clemson a big chance to win the Natty this year. They didn't look great on either side of the ball, but going into Texas, Steve Sarkisian's Longhorns have been slightly underwhelming beside an 11-win season, only losing to Georgia twice, which is pretty impressive. But they have one of the most talented offenses in the country with a very capable defense with multiple award winners and future draft picks. Ewers has somehow lowered his draft stock after this year at a few bad games, and Arch Manning, who took over for a few games, looks to be a competent backup and the starter in the future if Ewers decides to go elsewhere. I would predict Oregon. But either way, whether it's Golden, Bond, or Wingo, they have incredible wideouts. And I think they can burn Clemson's secondary as long as Ewers has a clean pocket and a great passing day. Ewers is great when he's good, but when he's having a bad day, man, does their offense stall, and it is not pretty. But when fully functioning, Texas is a top 3 team in the country. So as long as Ewers is at his best, Texas has a real chance of winning the whole thing. And that means I'm 100% taking Texas. I don't think they're going to be as good as people say, and we'll see that later on with my picks, but I think Clemson is honestly a step below the top tier of teams this year. And obviously, ASU gets the bye for winning the Big 12, but I'll still go over them. The second-year coach, Kenny Dillingham, has done wonders and turned around this program into a national powerhouse and Big 12 winning team. Redshirt freshman Sam Leavitt and Heisman finalist back Cam Scattlebo were incredible this year. Their offense was electric, winning 11 games after 2 straight 3-win seasons. I remember when Jaden Daniels, the future Heisman winner, was there. He got booed out of the locker room. It was pretty crazy to see. But this team is a new team. The Sun Devils went 4-0 against ranked opponents, and their high-powered offense allowed for very tight wins where their defense didn't do as much. And you guys are going to see a common trend for me where this year seems to be the year of the run game across all of football. So a Scattlebo-led offense may be enough to push their season past early December and into January. This year, the championship game is on the 20th. Usually it's right around New Year's, so that will be fun to see. Almost a month later, a huge layoff for all of these teams. But going back to ASU, I like their chances of steamrolling the winner of Texas Clemson. I think their offense, more specifically their run game, has a chance to just power through and make a big upset here. ASU Texas, I predict, will be a very fun game. But I don't see national championships in their future for the Sun Devils. But I wouldn't look past them to win a game or two. And we'll get to that Peach Bowl matchup later. And now Tennessee versus the Ohio State. Tennessee opens as the 7-point underdogs as the 8 and the 9 seed go at it, and their star redshirt freshman quarterback Nico Imaleva, close enough, had a slightly underwhelming season. He had a ton of high expectations, maybe too high, but despite all that, he still led the Wolves to 10 wins. And maybe by default, but they went to a more run-oriented offense with Dylan Sampson, who did have a career year. He looked great this year. And the Wolves had a hiccup mid-season, losing to Arkansas and then going to overtime against Florida. But they went 2-1 against ranked opponents this year and ended the year on a very high note, looking a lot better than they did earlier. So they'll need to start the playoff running with their offense and keep enough steam to surpass very talented rosters like the Buckeyes. So Ohio State is, in my opinion, the most misunderstood team in the entire bracket. They had a very weird season. Whether it was Kyle McCord's success, Will Howard losing that game against number one undefeated Oregon, or the frankly embarrassing effort against the team up north, the season feels like a complete failure for a lot of people right now. I'm not an Ohio State fan, but you can feel the resentment in the air. Everyone wants Ryan Day's head. But despite all of that, I'm still very high on the Buckeyes. They went 10-2 and obviously were the closest to beating an undefeated Oregon team. They stomped a high-flying Indiana team and dominated almost every game they were in. Ryan Day always seems to panic and try to beat Michigan how Michigan beats him. Like, he plays the Michigan brand of football against them, which of course will not work. And a rivalry week is always weird like that. Like, crazier things have happened. But hopefully the Michigan loss is not in their heads anymore, because this is a very talented football team, if not the most talented in the country. Will Howard is serviceable, nothing special, but has special talent on offense to compensate for his mid skills. To put it lightly, in my eyes, Jeremiah Smith is the most talented receiver in the country. As he gets older, he'll prove it. And Egbuka is quite the option out wide as well, very talented himself. And my favorite part of their roster is their backfield. They somehow got Travion Henderson to stay, and bringing in Quinshon Judkins is incredible to split carries for those two backs who are two of the best in the country. I'm a big fan of both players. I think that the run game will be crucial. Deeper into the playoffs, when offenses start to stall, you can rely on that run game, and Ohio State has the best in the country, pure talent-wise. The Michigan loss puts OSU in a bad spot in most recent memories, but with a very tough defense with guys like Downs and the most talented skill positions in the country on the offensive side of the ball, I have Ohio State as favorites to go pretty far this year. So I think Ohio State is going to turn some heads and beat Tennessee, and frankly, I don't think it will be too close. And now another team on a bye for winning the Big Ten. Weird to say Oregon in the Big Ten, but the only undefeated team in the field, the number one ranked team in the country. The Oregon Ducks dominated every team in their path. Dylan Gabriel has been great everywhere he goes and has been great for the Ducks this year. Running back Jordan James was incredible all year, and a very well-rounded receiving core led by Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson. Their defense is also filled with all-around studs. I love Bryce Becker or Matayo Ugalele, very talented guys, and they don't have any holes on the defense side of the ball, where Oregon almost always has a very physical and hard-nosed defense. Side note, I love that their kicker's name is Atticus Sappington. He sounds like someone on the Oregon Trail, not the Oregon Ducks. But this really does seem as close to a perfect team as we've seen this year, and you'll need a near-perfect effort to beat them. So going to the bottom half of the bracket, the first matchup is between SMU and Penn State. And the winner of this game will go against the Boise State Broncos. But first off, the 11-win Mustangs have turned a lot of heads as they've stampeded their way to the playoffs this year. Kevin Jennings took over at quarterback and led the team to a second-place finish in the ACC. Their defense was stifling, with multiple players nearing 100 tackles and interceptions all across the board. It may be eye-catching numbers-wise, but some very mediocre ACC teams gave them very tough games. Their offense is more balanced than other teams, but they need to rely on Jennings to lead the Mustangs in a Herculean effort throughout all the playoffs, but first against Penn State in the first round. The ACC has surprised many people this year. I'm pretty high on the ACC myself, and I think SMU can beat a slightly overrated Penn State team, but I don't think they have the overall talent to keep up further in the playoffs. The Nittany Lions are a team I'm not very high on at all. They finished the year 10-2, second in the Big Ten, which is not bad at all, but they struggled a lot against teams like Bowling Green, a bad USC, and I watched them live squeak out a win against Minnesota. Drew Aller is another serviceable quarterback. He doesn't play hero ball, he does his job well, but he had a great bailout target in Tyler Warren, who was one of the top tight ends in the country and had an incredible season. But their passing game wasn't very explosive or vertical, and Nick Singleton, who's very talented, still struggled to surpass his freshman year numbers in the backfield. They do have a good defense, which they normally do. Abdul Carter is one of the best edge rushers in the country, and it'll be up to him and the edge rushers on Penn State to contain Jennings in the pocket. SMU has a fast offense that might be able to outrun Penn State in its more bulky play style. So I do like SMU's chances here. A lot of people have them very high. You'll see how high I am on them, but I'm very low on Penn State. I think SMU is a great pick here to beat the favorites in Penn State. And our next bye is the team you all have heard about the entire year, the Boise State Broncos, Blue Mountain State in the Mountain West. And after a Heisman-worthy campaign from Ashton Jeanty, I think he deserved it, but I wouldn't give it away from Travis Hunter. He had a great year as well. But the Broncos earned a bye after a Mountain West winning season and a 12-win season, only losing to number 1 undefeated Oregon, and they only lost 34-37 in a very close game, to be fair. Their schedule is the main concern, as their offense dominated and was often subbed out before the second half even began. The same thing applies to Ashton Jeanty, and their only ranked win was fellow Mountain West opponent UNLV, which they did dominate to win the conference. Teams have been trying to stop Jeanty all year. Stacking the box does not seem to faze Jeanty, and Maddox Manson is more than good enough to deliver in depleted secondaries who are playing short for Jeanty to come out of the backfield. Boise State's secret weapon is their passing game. Jeanty completely opens the field up. Teams are stacking the box. If Boise State's defense can hold up and Jeanty can deliver against these very talented teams stacking the box against him, waiting specifically for him, Boise State could make a very legit run, and they do have a good side of the bracket to be on. And now the bottom half of this bracket is a very fun matchup of Curt Cignetti's Indiana versus Marcus Freeman's Notre Dame Fighting Irish. A very fun matchup. Two teams that had great years, and Curt Cignetti has transformed a nearly dead program and wins everywhere he goes. He was at 11-win team in James Madison last year. I mean, come on, what more can you do? But the Hoosiers' momentum did cool out after that Ohio State loss, but 11-1 is quite the achievement for a team who looked closer to going 1-11 under Tom Allen. And Ohio, not Ohio State transfer, Curtis Rourke, looked incredible all year. Besides Cignetti's JMU import Elijah Surratt, they had a very balanced offense and very balanced roster all around that didn't rely too much on star power. Since Cignetti was new to the program, they maintained a high-scoring offense throughout the season, but to be fair, they did face mainly the weaker half of the Big Ten, which is no fault of their own for winning games handed to them. But Notre Dame has been one of the best defenses in the country, so it will be a huge test for the Hoosiers against a very good Notre Dame team. Marcus Freeman is starting to show why he deserves the gig in South Bend. He had question marks as late as last year, but people are starting to see as he brings the Fighting Irish to another rare 11-win season, and outside of their embarrassing loss handed to them by 7-5 NIU at the start of the year, they couldn't handle the action. But beside that, they had an incredible year led by a stellar defense, a powerful run game, and frankly a great effort by Duke transfer quarterback Riley Leonard. They went 4-0 against ranked opponents, but as an independent team, they didn't face a single top 10 opponent. In Lake Tar Heel, Drake May, the former Blue Devil Riley Leonard, was surprisingly mobile with 14 rushing touchdowns. And having this mobile quarterback and an exceptional running back, Jeremiah Love, will play very nicely for the Irish throughout the playoffs. And as usual, the last few years, the Irish have brought in a transfer quarterback like Sam Hartman and completely relied on the run game once it started to slow down. However, their stifling defense will only benefit their style of offense, as guys like Jack Kaiser or Xavier Watts had exceptional and physical seasons that made Notre Dame's defensive unit something to reckon with. Freeman's style of coaching and style of play will benefit them, and I think the Irish can make a run for the championship here. I really do. But if they want to do that, the second team they'll have to face is the Georgia Bulldogs. And it's looking like no Carson Beck for the first quarterfinal game in the Sugar Bowl, which is pretty ironic considering what happened to Florida State last year. But we saw Stockton play their last game. It was not pretty. So after slight scares from UMass, Georgia Tech, and Texas, yes, I said UMass, they got thrashed, but come on, UMass sucks. Worst team in the country. The Bulldogs won the SEC regardless. But Carson Beck is another guy like Stetson Bennett who did win 2 natties, but I'm not really high on. They're good enough to lead stacked rosters, but won't do anything past that. But to be honest, Georgia's roster is stacked, and it's good enough to have a quarterback like that. Neither Etienne or Frazier were incredible in the backfield this year, and another very physical, very strong defense carried the load when the offense tended to stall. They feel very similar to a team they played twice in the Texas Longhorns, where they have extremely talented and lengthy defenses that came up huge in big games when the quarterback play slowed down and the run game was stopped at the line. But in their defense, they have guys like Jalon Walker and Malachi Starks who are very physical, and the Bulldogs defense always seems to play with a 12th man and fill up the field through these big and physical guys out there. So before we get to the top, my official pick will be Marcus Freeman's Notre Dame. I also don't think this game will be close. Indiana, incredible year. Curt Cignetti, incredible coach. I think Notre Dame's defense is going to stifle Indiana and win. It will be close, but I think Notre Dame's offense will win probably 30-20, something like that. And then to the top, the quarterfinals, the New Year's games. Starting with the Peach Bowl, we'll have Texas versus ASU. And Texas, when they're fully firing, is an incredible team. Very talented on offense, very talented in the secondary and on their line. With guys like Williams, they have multiple award winners. Wingo's great. That being said, I'm taking ASU. I love Dillingham, what he's done with the program. I think a strong run game from Scatterbo. People are going to see how good this guy really is. He is a monster. Texas knows about him, obviously. They have the line and the skill to stop him. ASU's defense was nothing Texas hasn't seen yet, but I really have not been impressed by Ewers. I think this is a type of game where he could get benched again in the third quarter, something like that. It's happened before this year. So I think if Ewers is fully firing, Texas is like top 3 in the country, but I don't think he will be, so I'm taking ASU to win the Peach Bowl and move on. And then moving down to the Rose Bowl, a classic Big Ten matchup, Ohio State-Oregon. This will be a very good game. Oregon's undefeated, and they narrowly beat Ohio State. In this rematch, I'm giving it to the Ohio State. I think they're going to learn from their mistakes. The Michigan game might have humbled them. Maybe they needed it. It could still hurt them mentally. We'll see. But I'm very impressed with Ohio State on both sides of the ball. They have very talented players. I think Will Howard knows what he has to do to beat Oregon, a team that really hasn't fought through deep adversity. Dan Lanning is kind of the man. He sunned Ryan Day last time. He proved he is the better coach, but I'm taking Ohio State to pull off the upset and get their revenge back on the Ducks. And going down to the Fiesta Bowl, we have the Mustangs versus the Broncos, SMU versus Boise State. I think one Cinderella team, if you could put it that, will move on, and it will be the Boise State Broncos, will win their first college football playoff game. SMU is very talented, but I think they're just not going to keep up with Genty. They're a team, Mountain West caliber, where we could see a freshly rested Genty rush for over 150 yards. He's going to be rested, and frankly, they're going to use him. This is the college football playoffs already. They have no reason not to. They want to win. Even if it's one game, they want to win in the playoffs. It will be huge for their school, and I think SMU won't have the answer to stop him. And then moving down to the Sugar Bowl, we have Notre Dame versus the Georgia Bulldogs. And historically, Notre Dame kind of gets stomped in the playoffs every year. Ian Book would try his best, and they would get shut out and lose by 40. But this is Marcus Freeman. This is not Kelly. I'm taking the Fighting Irish. I think their defense is going to stop Beck completely. And I think their offense, led by Jeremiah Love and a very mobile Riley Leonard, will be enough to get past the Dogs in their defense. I think this will be a low-scoring game and a very tight one, but the Irish will come out on top. So as you can see so far, I have been picking underdogs. We have a 7 moving on. We have an 11 in the Fiesta Bowl, and 8 seeded Ohio State. We have these moving on, but the common trend that I've kept up with, that I've looked at throughout the season, is the run games. That is my bread and butter when going to my bracket predictions. If I could have one advice for you in your brackets, your picks, your bets, rely on the run game as the teams will. The offenses start to stall. It happens. Teams slow down, and that's when that run game picks up. So guys like Cam Scatterbo will have big games here. Ohio State has 2 guys splitting carries who are both incredible running backs. Ashton Genty and Jeremiah Love all are incredible running backs, and even Riley Leonard at quarterback will be great for their teams to move on early in the playoffs. And we get to the semifinals, the Cotton Bowl and the Orange Bowl. I have a pretty weird bracket, but I like what I'm doing. We have ASU versus OSU and Boise State versus Notre Dame. Who would have thought these would be the final 4 teams in my bracket? Either way, the first matchup, ASU versus Ohio State. I think ASU, the Sun Devils, their run ends here. Ohio State is too talented. Their roster is incredible. I think Cam Scatterbo might finally get stopped against Ohio State's physical defense. And Ohio State's receiving core, Egbuka, Jeremiah Smith, I think will be far too much for ASU's defense to handle. And Ohio State will be moving on to the national championship game. And in the Orange Bowl, Boise State Notre Dame would be a very fun matchup, and I'm going to be taking the Fighting Irish Notre Dame. I love their defense, and if anyone can stop Ashton Genty, it will be Notre Dame. They have huge linebackers like Jack Kaiser. They have really physical safeties, and I think Notre Dame's offense and their run game just might be too much for Genty, but Notre Dame has the star power to overwhelm Boise State and move on to the national championship against Ohio State on the 20th. And I cannot wait for the national championship. This will be the most fun one in a very long time, possibly ever, with 12 teams this year. I think the best of the 2 will be Ohio State, Notre Dame. If I could pick a third to get this far, it would definitely be Oregon. But I think Ohio State would get their revenge, and that's just how the brackets happen to match up. And I'm very high on the Fighting Irish, on Marcus Freeman, on their offense, and they never get this far in the playoffs. They kind of get embarrassed every single year. And I think it might happen again. Oregon State is just very good. They had those bad losses. People are going to remember that Michigan loss. They got embarrassed on the field and after the field. So I think it's in people's head that Ohio State sucks, Ryan Day sucks, and they're forgetting it's a very talented football team with a very talented offense and defense. So I think this is where Notre Dame's run will end. Ohio State might be able to win this game comfortably. If anyone can beat Notre Dame's defense, it's the wideouts and the backfield of Ohio State. So putting in the score, I'd say final score 32 Ohio State, 24 Notre Dame. And if I can do math at all, that is close to 56 as a general guess of adding 2 very short numbers. So comment down below how trash you think my picks are. If you like any of my picks, what your picks are. I love to talk to you guys. Thank you guys for watching and have a Merry Christmas.